Gunfire erupted beneath the glittering crystal chandeliers of the Grand Crescent Hotel, shattering the illusion of elegance that had filled the ballroom only seconds earlier. Screams echoed through the massive hall as wealthy guests dove beneath tables draped in white silk. Wine glasses exploded. Silver trays crashed to the marble floor. Panic spread like wildfire among politicians, business executives, celebrities, and socialites who had gathered for what was supposed to be the city's most prestigious charity gala of the year. Outside, Manhattan's skyline sparkled against the night sky. Inside, all hell had broken loose. Sophia Bennett stood frozen near the center of the ballroom. Her breathing was ragged. Her pulse thundered in her ears. The elegant black evening gown she wore was stained with blood. Not her blood. Someone else's. Just hours earlier, she had been worrying about an upcoming nursing exam and whether she could afford next month's rent. Now she was standing in the middle of a war. A war she never knew existed. A war that had been waiting for her since the day she was born. Another gunshot rang out. The sound echoed through the ballroom like thunder. Sophia flinched instinctively. Guests scrambled toward emergency exits. Bodyguards formed protective circles around terrified civilians. Armed men in expensive tailored suits rushed across the room with weapons drawn. The charity gala had transformed into a battlefield. And somehow, everyone seemed to be looking at her. Sophia's trembling gaze swept across the chaos. Across the ballroom, a group of heavily armed men surrounded an older gentleman whose presence alone commanded absolute authority. Even in the middle of the violence, people instinctively moved aside for him. His silver hair was perfectly groomed. His tailored suit looked worth more than Sophia's annual tuition. And the cold intensity in his eyes made even armed men hesitate. Vittorio Romano. A name whispered throughout New York. A man whose influence stretched from City Hall to Wall Street. A man powerful enough to make judges nervous and politicians obedient. A man Sophia had never met. Yet at this moment, his eyes never left her. Not even once. Another burst of gunfire echoed through the ballroom. The men surrounding Vittorio immediately raised their weapons. But the powerful crime boss ignored them. Ignored the danger. Ignored the chaos. Ignored everything except the young woman standing across the room. Sophia. Confusion twisted inside her chest. Why was he staring at her? Why did she feel as if she had seen those eyes before? And why did everyone suddenly seem terrified of what might happen next? Beside her stood Luca Romano. His hand remained firmly wrapped around hers. Strong. Protective. Steady. The same hand that had pulled her to safety moments earlier. The same hand she had grown to trust. The same hand that had also lied to her. Sophia looked up at him. His jaw was clenched. His dark eye scanned every corner of the ballroom. Searching for threats. Calculating escape routes. Preparing for a fight. Yet despite the danger surrounding them, Luca never released her hand. As if letting go would somehow destroy them both. A sudden crash echoed from the balcony above. Several guests screamed. More armed men appeared. The tension inside the room became unbearable. Sophia felt trapped between two worlds. The life she thought she understood. And the nightmare she had only recently discovered. Then something happened that silenced the room. Vittorio Romano stepped forward. One step. Then another. His bodyguards immediately tried to stop him. He brushed them aside. The most feared man in New York continued walking directly toward Sophia. No one moved. No one spoke. Even the gunfire outside seemed distant. The ballroom held its breath. Sophia's heart pounded violently. She had so many questions. Questions about her mother. Questions about Luca. Questions about the secrets that had shattered her life. Questions about the dangerous world she had been dragged into. Vittorio finally stopped in front of her. For a moment, Neither of them spoke. The powerful crime boss stared at her as though he were looking at a ghost. As though he were staring into the past. Then something completely unexpected happened. The man who ruled an empire. The man feared by criminals and politicians alike. The man whose enemies disappeared without explanation. Dropped to one knee. Gasps filled the ballroom. Nobody could believe what they were seeing. Several bodyguards exchanged stunned looks. Even Luca appeared shocked. Sophia simply stared, unable to process what was happening. Vittorio's eyes glistened with emotion. Pain. Regret. Love. The kind of emotions powerful men rarely allowed themselves to show. His voice cracked as he spoke. My daughter. The word struck Sophia harder than any bullet. The world seemed to stop. Her daughter? No. That was impossible. Her father was dead. Her mother had told her so. Hadn't she? Vittorio swallowed hard. His voice barely above a whisper. My daughter, forgive me. Before Sophia could respond. Before anyone could explain. The ballroom doors exploded inward. Gunfire erupted once again. And everything changed. 6 months earlier. The shrill sound of an alarm clock pierced the darkness of Sophia Bennett's tiny apartment at exactly 4:45 a.m. She groaned and reached blindly across her nightstand until her fingers found the phone. The alarm stopped. Silence returned. For a few seconds, she remained motionless beneath the thin blanket, staring at the cracked ceiling above her bed. Another day. Another shift. Another battle. Outside her window, New York City was still asleep beneath the pre-dawn darkness. Streetlights cast pale orange shadows across the narrow apartment building across the street. Sophia rubbed her tired eyes. Her body ached. She had finished studying after midnight. Her nursing program at Columbia Medical School was demanding enough on its own, but balancing classes, hospital rotations, and a part-time job often felt impossible. Still, she had no choice. Nobody was coming to save her. Nobody ever had. Sophia slowly sat up and glanced toward the framed photograph resting on her dresser. The picture had become the first thing she looked at every morning. And the last thing she looked at every night. A younger version of her mother smiled back from the frame. Sarah Bennett. Warm. Kind. Beautiful. Gone. A sharp ache settled in Sophia's chest. It had been 1 year since cancer stole the only family she had ever known. 1 year since she had sat beside a hospital bed and held her mother's hand until the very end. 1 year since the world had become painfully quiet. The grief never truly disappeared. It simply learned how to hide. Sophia stood and crossed the room. Her fingers gently brushed against the frame. Beside the photograph sat another picture. An older, faded photograph. One she had stared at countless times growing up. The only photograph that supposedly included her father. The image was blurry. A young Sarah stood beside a tall man whose face was partially obscured by sunlight. Sophia couldn't make out his features. She never could. According to her mother, he had died before Sophia was born. A tragic car accident. At least that was the story she had heard her entire life. She had stopped asking questions years ago. Whenever she brought him up, sadness would cloud her mother's eyes. So eventually, she learned to let it go. Still. Some mornings she found herself staring at that photograph longer than usual. Wondering. Who was he? What had he been like? Did she have his smile? His eyes? His laugh? Sophia sighed and turned away. Some questions simply didn't have answers. At least not for people like her. People struggling just to survive. An hour later, she stepped into the freezing New York morning carrying a worn backpack and a coffee she couldn't really afford. The city was already beginning to wake up. Construction workers filled the sidewalks. Delivery trucks crowded the streets. Subway entrances swallowed thousands of exhausted commuters. Everyone rushing somewhere. Everyone chasing something. Sophia joined them. By 6 a.m., she was inside St. Catherine Medical Center. The hospital never slept. Patients arrived constantly. Doctors rushed through hallways. Monitors beeped. Phones rang. Nurses moved from room to room with practiced efficiency. Sophia loved it. Not because it was easy. Because it mattered. Even on her worst days. Even when she was exhausted. Helping people gave her purpose. A purpose she desperately needed after losing her mother. As she entered room 214, an elderly patient named Mrs. Henderson immediately smiled. "Good morning, sweetheart." Sophia smiled back. "Morning, Mrs. Henderson. How are we feeling today?" "Old." Sophia laughed. "I don't think that's a medical condition." "It should be." The old woman chuckled. For several minutes, Sophia helped her settle comfortably before checking her chart. It wasn't part of her assignment. She simply cared. That was who she was. Throughout the morning, she moved from patient to patient, offering encouragement, listening to fears, holding hands, comforting families. Sometimes those small moments mattered more than medicine. Around noon, Sophia finally sat down long enough to check her bank account. Her stomach immediately dropped. $317. That was all she had left until next week's paycheck. Rent was due soon. Tuition payments were approaching. And her car needed repairs she couldn't afford. Wonderful. Sophia closed the banking app and rubbed her temples. Stress had become a permanent roommate. But complaining wouldn't solve anything. It never did. After finishing her hospital rotation, she headed directly to her second job. A small coffee shop located 3 blocks from campus. The afternoon crowd was relentless. Students, tourists, office workers, everyone demanding caffeine. By the end of her shift, her feet felt like they were on fire. Yet she still forced a smile for every customer. Because tips mattered. Every dollar mattered. That evening, after leaving work, Sophia noticed a homeless veteran sitting near the subway entrance. She recognized him immediately. He was there most nights. The elderly man sat wrapped in a worn military jacket, staring at the ground. Without hesitation, Sophia walked back into the coffee shop. She used part of her tip money to buy a sandwich and a hot drink. Money she couldn't spare. But somehow always found herself giving away. The veteran looked surprised when she handed him the food. "You don't have to do this." Sophia smiled. "I know." For a moment, tears filled the man's eyes. "Thank you." Sophia simply nodded and continued walking. She never waited for gratitude. Helping people wasn't something she did for recognition. It was simply who she was. Hours later, darkness covered the city. Exhausted beyond words, Sophia finally descended the stairs into the subway station. The platform was packed. Hundreds of commuters waited for the next train. She leaned against a column and closed her eyes. Just for a second. Just long enough to rest. The train arrived moments later. Passengers surged forward. Sophia stepped aboard and immediately realized every seat was occupied. Every seat except one. Near the far end of the train. Beside a man dressed in a dark coat. He sat alone. Calm. Silent. Almost as if the chaos around him didn't exist. Sophia adjusted her backpack and slowly made her way toward the empty seat. She had no idea that this simple decision was about to change her life forever. Nor did she notice the 2 men standing in separate train cars who had quietly watched her throughout the entire journey. Watching. Waiting. Protecting. Just as they had done for years. As Sophia reached the empty seat, she turned toward the stranger beside it and spoke softly. "Is this seat taken?" The train doors slid shut with a metallic hiss. A moment later, the subway lurched forward, disappearing into the underground maze beneath Manhattan. Sophia tightened her grip on her backpack as she navigated through the crowded aisle. Most passengers stared at their phones. Others wore headphones. A few looked half asleep after long shifts and exhausting workdays. Nobody paid attention to anyone else. New York had a way of making people invisible. Sophia was used to it. By the time she reached the empty seat, her legs felt like they might give out. She shifted the weight of her backpack and glanced toward the man sitting beside it. He looked to be around 28. Dark hair. Sharp jawline. Broad shoulders. His black overcoat fit perfectly, making him appear more like a businessman than a subway commuter. Yet something about him felt different. Not dangerous exactly. Just alert. His eyes weren't fixed on a phone. They weren't closed in exhaustion. Instead, they calmly studied the reflections in the subway windows. Watching. Observing. As if he never truly relaxed. Sophia hesitated briefly before speaking. "Is this seat taken?" The man turned toward her. His dark eyes met hers. For a brief second, neither of them spoke. Sophia suddenly felt self-conscious. Maybe she should have stood instead. Maybe. No. His voice was deep and calm. He moved slightly. "You can sit." Relieved, Sophia smiled. "Thanks." She carefully lowered herself into the seat and immediately felt the exhaustion hit her. Every muscle in her body seemed grateful. For a few moments, silence settled between them. The rhythmic clatter of the train filled the space. Sophia leaned her head back against the seat. She told herself she wouldn't fall asleep. She told herself she'd stay alert. She lasted less than 30 seconds. A small yawn escaped her. Then another. The stranger noticed. A faint smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Long day." Sophia laughed softly. "You have no idea." The man raised an eyebrow. "Nursing student." Her eyes widened. "How did you know?" He nodded toward the hospital identification badge hanging from her bag. Sophia looked down and laughed. "Right." The stranger's expression softened slightly. "Tough program. You know nurses. My mother was one." Something flickered across his face. A memory. Gone almost instantly. Sophia noticed it anyway. "My mom was a nurse too." The words slipped out before she could stop them. For a moment, sadness clouded her features. The stranger noticed immediately. His expression became more serious. Was. Sophia looked down. "She passed away last year." A brief silence followed. "I'm sorry." The sympathy in his voice sounded genuine. Not forced. Not polite. Real. Sophia appreciated that. Most people didn't know what to say when they heard about her mother. They either changed the subject or offered meaningless clichés. This felt different. "Thank you." The stranger nodded. Then the silence returned. But it wasn't uncomfortable. Oddly enough, it felt peaceful. Outside the train windows, darkness raced past. Station after station blurred together. Neither of them noticed the man standing near the rear doors. He appeared to be reading a newspaper. In reality, he hadn't turned a page in 12 minutes. His attention remained fixed on Sophia. The earpiece hidden beneath his collar crackled softly. "Subject is seated." A voice answered. "Copy." Across the train, another man wearing a baseball cap sat quietly near the opposite exit. His eyes remained on his phone. Yet his camera was pointed directly toward Sophia. Monitoring. Recording. Protecting. the way he had done nearly every day for years. Back near the center of the train, the stranger's gaze shifted toward the reflection in the subway window. His eyes narrowed slightly. He noticed the men instantly. Most people wouldn't. He wasn't most people. Years of experience had trained him to recognize surveillance, to identify threats, to notice details others missed. The newspaper, the baseball cap, the deliberate positioning, the constant visual contact. Interesting. Very interesting. The stranger casually returned his attention to Sophia. She remained completely unaware. "What's your name?" she asked suddenly. The question caught him slightly off guard. Most people avoided conversations with strangers on New York subways. Sophia apparently wasn't most people. "Luca." "Sophia." He nodded. "Nice to meet you, Sophia." "You too." A small smile appeared on her face. The conversation continued naturally, easily, as if they had known each other longer than 15 minutes. They talked about school, work, the city. Nothing particularly important. Yet neither seemed eager for the conversation to end. For the first time in weeks, Sophia found herself forgetting about bills, about stress, about grief. For a few minutes, life felt normal again. Luca noticed it too. The way she smiled, the way she laughed, the way she carried sadness without allowing it to make her bitter. There was something refreshing about her. Something genuine. Something rare. The train eventually slowed. A computerized voice announced the next station. Sophia glanced up. "This is me." For reasons he couldn't explain, Luca felt disappointed. He hadn't expected that. Sophia stood and adjusted her backpack. "Thanks for letting me steal your seat." A faint smile appeared on Luca's face. "You asked first." She laughed. "Good point." The train doors opened. Passengers began exiting. Sophia stepped toward the platform, then paused. She turned back. "Maybe I'll see you around." Luca studied her for a second. Something told him this wasn't goodbye. Maybe. Sophia smiled one last time before disappearing into the crowd. The doors closed. The train pulled away. Luca continued watching the platform through the window until she vanished completely. Then his expression changed. The warmth disappeared. His eyes became sharp, focused, dangerous. He glanced toward the reflection of the two surveillance men. Still watching. Still following. Still protecting. The question forming in his mind refused to go away. Who exactly was Sophia Bennett? And why did she need armed shadows following her everywhere she went? Meanwhile, above ground, Sophia climbed the station stairs and disappeared into the evening crowd. She never noticed the black SUV parked across the street. Never noticed the man behind the wheel. Never noticed him lift a phone to his ear. His voice remained low. Professional. "She's safe." A pause. Then he listened. "Yes, sir." Another pause. "Same route tomorrow." The call ended. The SUV pulled away from the curb. And somewhere in New York City, a very powerful man quietly exhaled in relief. Just as he had every single day for 22 years. For the next several days, Sophia Bennett assumed her encounter with Luca on the subway had been exactly what it appeared to be. A random conversation. A chance meeting. Nothing more. New York was filled with 8 million people. The odds of seeing the same stranger twice felt almost impossible. Yet somehow, 3 days later, she saw him again. It happened inside a small coffee shop 2 blocks from St. Catherine Medical Center. Sophia had just finished a brutal 12-hour hospital rotation. She looked exhausted. Her hair was pulled into a messy bun. Dark circles lingered beneath her eyes. The line for coffee stretched almost to the door. As she waited, her gaze drifted toward a corner table. And there he was. Luca. Seated alone. A black coffee resting beside an open newspaper. For a moment, she wondered if she was imagining things. Then he looked up. Their eyes met. Recognition immediately flashed across his face. A small smile appeared. Looks like the seat wasn't enough. Sophia laughed. Apparently not. She walked over. Mind if I sit down? Luca gestured toward the empty chair. Go ahead. The conversation picked up as naturally as before. No awkwardness. No forced small talk. Just two strangers who somehow found comfort in each other's company. Neither noticed the man seated near the front window pretending to work on a laptop. He had arrived 10 minutes before Sophia. And he had been monitoring the entrance the entire time. The moment she walked through the door, he discreetly adjusted the microphone hidden beneath his collar. His voice remained low. Subject has entered the coffee shop. A brief pause. Then. Negative. Another pause. Same individual from the subway. The call ended. The man returned to typing meaningless words onto his screen. Watching. Waiting. Protecting. Across the room, Luca noticed him immediately. The same man from the train. Interesting. Very interesting. His instincts told him this wasn't coincidence. People didn't accidentally appear around the same person over and over again. Especially not trained professionals. Because that was exactly what they were. Professionals. Luca could tell from the way they positioned themselves. The way they observed exits. The way they monitored everyone who approached Sophia. These weren't stalkers. These weren't private investigators. These were protection specialists. The question was, who was paying for them? And why? The mystery followed him throughout the week. Everywhere Sophia went, the shadows followed. The hospital. The university. The coffee shop. The subway. Always nearby. Always watching. Never interacting. Never revealing themselves. Like ghosts. One Friday evening, Luca finally decided to seek answers. Not from Sophia. From someone who might actually know. 2 hours later, he entered a private restaurant located behind an unmarked door in Brooklyn. The establishment looked ordinary from the outside. Inside, it served as neutral ground for some of New York's most powerful men. The moment Luca entered, conversations quieted. Several men nodded respectfully. Others avoided eye contact entirely. Luca moved through the restaurant and approached a private booth near the back. A heavy-set man in his 60s sat alone. Frank Marino. One of the oldest capos in the Romano organization. A man who had survived 4 mob wars and 3 assassination attempts. Frank looked up. You look troubled. Luca sat down. I have a question. Frank smirked. That's usually dangerous. Luca leaned forward. A girl. The older man laughed. Definitely dangerous. I'm serious. Frank noticed the expression on Luca's face. The amusement faded. What about her? Luca carefully described Sophia. Not her name. Not at first. Only her appearance. Her routine. The security detail. The surveillance. The strange behavior surrounding her. As he spoke, Frank's expression gradually changed. The color drained from his face. His eyes narrowed. When Luca finally mentioned her name, the older capo froze completely. For several seconds, neither man spoke. Then Frank slowly lowered his glass. You need to stay away from her. Luca blinked. What? You heard me. Frank's voice had become unusually serious. Forget she exists. Luca stared at him. Why? Frank immediately looked away. A clear sign. He knew something. A lot more than he wanted to admit. Frank. No. What's going on? The older capo sighed heavily. You've been around this life long enough to recognize when a door should stay closed. Lucky for me, I've never been good at following instructions. Frank muttered a curse under his breath. Then he leaned forward. His voice barely above a whisper. Some secrets exist because powerful men need them to. Luca's eyes narrowed. Powerful enough to scare you? Frank's silence answered the question. And that frightened Luca more than words ever could. Because Frank Marino feared almost nobody. Not police. Not politicians. Not rival families. Not even death. Yet somehow, the mention of Sophia Bennett had unsettled him. The conversation ended shortly afterward. Frank refused to say another word. No matter how many questions Luca asked. By the time Luca left the restaurant, he had learned almost nothing. Yet somehow, he knew more than before. Sophia Bennett wasn't ordinary. She wasn't being protected because she was wealthy. Or famous. Or politically connected. This was something much bigger. Much older. Much more dangerous. The deeper he thought about it, the more obsessed he became. Who was she? Why had her entire life been surrounded by invisible guardians? And why did powerful men refuse to even discuss her existence? 3 nights later, unable to ignore his instincts any longer, Luca sat alone inside his apartment. A laptop glowed on the kitchen table. Beside it sat several files. Public records. Archived news articles. Birth records. Hospital records. Everything he had managed to gather. Most of it led nowhere. Dead ends. Missing information. Sealed documents. But one thing stood out. One particular gap. A missing section of Sophia's family history. A hole so deliberate it practically screamed for attention. Luca stared at the screen. His pulse slowly quickening. For the first time, he felt as though he was standing at the edge of something enormous. Something hidden for more than 2 decades. And if his suspicions were correct, the answer wouldn't just explain Sophia. It would explain why some of the most powerful people in New York had spent 22 years protecting a struggling nursing student who didn't even know she was being watched. Luca leaned back in his chair. Then quietly opened another file. A file connected to one of the most feared names in organized crime. Vittorio Romano. And for the first time, pieces of an impossible puzzle began falling into place. Rain hammered against Luca Romano's apartment windows as midnight settled over Manhattan. The city below remained alive. Sirens echoed through distant streets. Headlights crawled across wet avenues. Neon signs reflected against puddles like fractured pieces of another world. But Luca barely noticed. His entire attention remained fixed on the laptop sitting in front of him. For 3 consecutive nights, he had been digging. Searching. Connecting pieces that didn't seem to belong together. Most of what he found made no sense. Missing documents. Sealed records. Government files that should have existed but didn't. Entire sections of Sophia Bennett's history appeared to have been erased. Not accidentally. Deliberately. And that alone was enough to keep him digging. Because in Luca's world, people only spent that kind of money and effort hiding something valuable. Or someone valuable. He clicked open another archived newspaper article from 23 years earlier. The headline immediately caught his attention. Local businessman survives assassination attempt outside St. Gabriel Medical Center. Luca narrowed his eyes. The article itself was heavily edited. Several paragraphs appeared removed. Names were missing. Details had been scrubbed. But one fact remained. A young nurse had reportedly saved the man's life after multiple gunshot wounds. The nurse's name had been removed from every public version of the story. Yet somehow, one tiny detail remained buried in a forgotten archive. Sarah Bennett. Sophia's mother. Luca sat upright. His pulse quickened. For the first time, a direct connection appeared. Sarah Bennett. Vittorio Romano. 23 years ago. Luca immediately opened another file. Then another. And another. The pieces began fitting together with terrifying precision. Vittorio Romano had been 36 years old when the shooting occurred. Already powerful. Already feared. Already building one of the largest criminal organizations in New York. Yet according to several private reports, something unusual happened after the assassination attempt. For nearly 18 months, Vittorio disappeared from public life. No major meetings. No public appearances. No known relationships. Nothing. It was as if the future king of New York's underworld had temporarily vanished. Until now. Until Luca discovered Sarah Bennett. The timeline fit perfectly. Too perfectly. He continued reading. Then froze. One document. One single line. One detail hidden beneath thousands of pages. A confidential hospital insurance claim. The claim listed Sarah Bennett as receiving financial assistance from an anonymous private trust. The trust had been established 22 years ago. The exact year Sophia was born. Luca felt his stomach tighten. His eyes moved toward another file. Sophia's birth certificate. Something immediately stood out. Father's name. Redacted. Not blank. Redacted. Someone with serious influence had intentionally removed it. His heartbeat accelerated. Now he knew. Or at least he thought he knew. But proving it required one final step. Luca reached for his phone. A few minutes later, a call connected. The voice on the other end sounded irritated. What? Luca ignored the tone. I need a favor. No. I'm serious. Which means it's definitely a bad idea. Luca sighed. Run a DNA probability analysis. The man on the phone became silent. Then. On who? Luca gave two names. The silence that followed lasted nearly 10 seconds. Are you out of your mind? Just run it. You realize whose name you just said? Run it. The line disconnected. Hours passed. Luca barely moved. Outside, the rain continued falling. Inside, anxiety slowly built. At 3:17 a.m., his phone buzzed. One message. One attachment. His hands felt unusually heavy as he opened it. Then he saw the results. And everything stopped. Probability of biological relationship. 99.97%. Luca stared at the screen. Read it again. Then again. His chest tightened. Because the impossible was suddenly real. Sophia Bennett wasn't simply connected to Vittorio Romano. She was his daughter. His biological daughter. His heir. The future successor to one of the most powerful criminal empires in America. And she had absolutely no idea. Luca leaned back in stunned silence. Images flooded his mind. Sophia struggling to pay tuition. Sophia counting dollars before buying groceries. Sophia working double shifts. Sophia giving her own money to homeless veterans. Sophia worrying about rent. All while unknowingly connected to a fortune worth hundreds of millions. The irony was almost cruel. A girl born into unimaginable power. Living as though she had nothing. For several minutes, Luca simply sat there. Trying to process what he'd uncovered. Then another realization hit him. Something even more alarming. The bodyguards, The surveillance teams. The mysterious protection. Everything suddenly made sense. Vittorio Romano had never abandoned Sophia. He had been watching from a distance. Protecting her. Shielding her. Ensuring she survived. Without ever revealing himself. For 22 years. The sheer scale of that operation was staggering. Millions of dollars. Hundreds of personnel. Decades of secrecy. All focused on one person. Sophia. A knock suddenly interrupted his thoughts. Luca opened the apartment door. Frank Marino stood outside. The old capo looked exhausted. As if he'd aged 10 years overnight. "You found it, didn't you?" Luca said nothing. Frank didn't need an answer. The expression on Luca's face told him everything. The older man entered quietly and closed the door. For several moments, neither spoke. Finally, Frank sighed. "I warned you." "You knew." Frank nodded. "Most of the senior people know." "Why hide her?" Frank looked toward the window. "Because every enemy Vittorio ever made would use her against him." Luca understood immediately. Kidnapping. Extortion. Murder. Leverage. The daughter of a mafia king wasn't a child. She was a target. Frank's voice softened. Sarah made Vittorio promise. What promise? That Sophia would grow up normal. Luca laughed bitterly. Normal. As normal as possible. The old capo paused. Sarah never wanted her daughter anywhere near this life. The room fell silent again. Luca's thoughts drifted towards Sophia. She was probably asleep right now. Completely unaware. Completely innocent. Completely vulnerable. And for the first time since meeting her, Luca looked at her differently. Not as the exhausted nursing student from the subway. Not as the girl from the coffee shop. Not even as the woman he was slowly beginning to care about. But as something far more dangerous. A secret. A secret worth killing for. A secret powerful enough to start a war. And somewhere deep inside, a feeling he couldn't explain began to grow. Because for reasons that made absolutely no sense. The more he learned about Sophia Bennett, the more determined he became to protect her. For the next several weeks, Luca Romano carried a secret that grew heavier every time he saw Sophia Bennett. Every smile. Every conversation. Every moment they spent together. The truth remained trapped inside him. Sophia had no idea that the life she believed was hers had been carefully constructed from the moment she was born. She still believed she was an ordinary nursing student. Still believed her father had died before she entered the world. Still believed she was completely alone. And every day that passed made it harder for Luca to tell her otherwise. Because somewhere along the way, what started as curiosity had become something far more dangerous. He was falling for her. It happened gradually. So gradually he didn't notice it at first. One Saturday afternoon, they found themselves walking through Central Park beneath a canopy of golden autumn leaves. The city felt different there. Quieter. Softer. Far removed from the chaos of Manhattan traffic. Sophia carried a paper cup of coffee while Luca walked beside her. "You know," she said suddenly, "I used to think adults had everything figured out." Luca laughed. "That was your first mistake." She smiled. "No, seriously. When I was a kid, I thought once I became an adult, everything would make sense. And now?" She looked ahead. "Now I realize everyone is just pretending." Luca couldn't help smiling. "That's probably the most accurate thing I've heard all week." Sophia laughed. The sound warmed something inside him. It had become his favorite sound. A realization he wasn't entirely comfortable admitting. They continued walking. Talking about everything and nothing. Dreams. Books. Childhood memories. Favorite movies. Small pieces of themselves exchanged one conversation at a time. For Sophia, it felt effortless. Natural. Safe. She hadn't felt this comfortable with anyone since losing her mother. The loneliness that had consumed her for the past year seemed to fade whenever Luca was around. It confused her, because she barely knew him. And yet somehow she trusted him. Far more than she should. A week later, they met again. This time near the East River. The city lights reflected against the dark water as they sat together on a wooden bench. Sophia watched boats moving across the river. "Can I ask you something?" Luca nodded. "Anything?" She hesitated, then quietly asked, "Do you ever feel like you're living the wrong life?" The question caught him off guard. His expression tightened slightly. "What do you mean?" Sophia looked down. "I don't know." She sighed. "Sometimes I feel like my whole life is just surviving." Luca remained silent. Listening. It's school. Work. Bills. Stress. She laughed bitterly. "Wake up. Repeat. Wake up. Repeat." The sadness in her voice wasn't dramatic. It was honest. And somehow that made it worse. Sophia wasn't complaining. She was exhausted. Luca understood that feeling better than most. "You ever wonder if you're meant for something else?" she asked. The irony nearly made him laugh. If only she knew. If only she understood how much more awaited her. How different her life actually was. Instead, he simply answered. "Every day." Their eyes met. For a moment, neither looked away. Something shifted between them. Subtle. Powerful. Dangerous. The kind of moment neither person forgets. Sophia felt her heart beat slightly faster. So did Luca. Neither acknowledged it. But both felt it. Over the following month, their relationship continued to deepen. Coffee became routine. Dinner became common. Long conversations became expected. Sophia started looking forward to seeing him. Started checking her phone more often. Started smiling whenever his name appeared. Even her classmates noticed. "You like him." The accusation came from her best friend Emily during a study session. Sophia nearly choked on her coffee. "What?" Emily laughed. "You smile every time he texts." "I do not." "You absolutely do." Sophia opened her mouth to argue. Then stopped. Because she knew Emily was right. The realization made her cheeks warm. For the first time since her mother's death, she felt hopeful about something. About someone. Meanwhile, Luca's situation became increasingly complicated. Every day he learned more about Sophia. Every day he cared more. And every day the secret became harder to carry. Several times he almost told her. Almost. But each time, fear stopped him. Not fear for himself. Fear for her. Because once Sophia learned the truth, her entire world would collapse. There would be no going back. No normal life. No ignorance. No peace. Everything would change. One rainy evening, they sat together inside a quiet bookstore cafe. Sophia flipped through a novel while Luca watched her from across the table. "What?" she asked. "Nothing." "You're staring." Luca smiled. "I know." Sophia laughed softly. Then her expression became more thoughtful. "You know what's weird?" "What?" "I feel like I've known you longer than a few months." The word struck him harder than she realized. Because he felt exactly the same way. The connection between them had become undeniable. Dangerously undeniable. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then Sophia reached across the table. Her hand brushed his. A simple gesture. Barely noticeable. Yet it sent a jolt through both of them. Neither pulled away. Outside, rain tapped gently against the windows. Inside, something important silently changed. Neither knew exactly what it meant. But both knew it mattered. Very much. Across the street, inside a black SUV, a man lowered a pair of binoculars. He reached for his phone. Still together. A pause. Then, "Yes, sir." Another pause. The man listened carefully. His expression suddenly darkened. Understood. The call ended. The guard immediately started the vehicle. Because somewhere else in New York City, another conversation was taking place. One that would change everything. A rival crime family had finally uncovered a secret that had remained buried for 22 years. Sophia Bennett existed. And for men who built empires through violence, power, and leverage. The daughter of Vittorio Romano was worth more than gold. She was a weapon. A bargaining chip. A target. And before long, the peaceful life Sophia had fought so hard to build would be shattered forever. The countdown had officially begun. The first sign that something was wrong arrived on a Tuesday evening. Sophia never noticed it. But Luca did. He noticed everything. The moment he stepped out of the restaurant after dinner with Sophia, his instincts immediately flared. The street looked normal. Traffic moved steadily. Pedestrians filled the sidewalks. Nothing appeared unusual. Yet something felt different. Off. Dangerously off. Years in the underworld had taught him to trust that feeling. It had saved his life more times than he could count. Sophia smiled as they reached the subway entrance. Same time Friday. Luca forced a smile. Yeah. She leaned forward and kissed his cheek. Quick. Soft. Unexpected. Before he could react, she turned and disappeared down the station stairs. Luca stood frozen for a moment. A strange warmth spread through his chest. Then he saw it. A black sedan parked across the street. The windows were heavily tinted. The vehicle had been there earlier. He was sure of it. As he watched, the driver's side window lowered slightly. Just enough. A camera lens appeared. Click. A photograph. Then another. The window rolled back up. The car pulled away. Luca's stomach tightened. That wasn't one of Vittorio's surveillance teams. He knew their faces. He knew their vehicles. This was someone else. Someone new. Someone dangerous. And that terrified him. Because there was only one reason another organization would start watching Sophia. They had discovered her. The following night confirmed his fears. Luca arrived at a private warehouse near the Brooklyn waterfront. One of the Romano family's secure meeting locations. The moment he entered, he knew something was wrong. The atmosphere felt tense. Several soldiers stood unusually alert. Senior captains whispered among themselves. Nobody laughed. Nobody relaxed. A storm was coming. At the far end of the warehouse stood Vittorio Romano himself. The aging crime boss stared at a large map spread across a steel table. His expression was colder than Luca had ever seen. Around him stood several high-ranking members of the organization. The meeting had already begun. Luca approached carefully. What happened? Nobody answered immediately. Finally, Frank Marino spoke. They know. The words landed like a hammer. Luca felt his chest tighten. Who? Frank looked at him. The De Lucas. Every muscle in Luca's body went rigid. Marco De Luca. The most ruthless rival boss in New York. A man who viewed violence as negotiation. A predator who spent years searching for weaknesses inside the Romano organization. And now he had found the biggest one imaginable. Sophia. Vittorio slowly turned toward Luca. His eyes looked darker than usual. Older. Tired. As though 22 years of fear had finally become reality. How? Luca asked. One of the captains tossed a folder onto the table. Dirty detective. Luca opened it. Inside were photographs. Sophia leaving school. Sophia entering the hospital. Sophia walking through Central Park. Sophia sitting beside him. Sophia laughing. Sophia living her life. The realization made him sick. Someone had been documenting her for weeks. Maybe months. Marco had been building a file. Preparing. Waiting. Vittorio's voice broke the silence. 3 nights ago, one of DeLuca's men paid Detective Raymond Harris $200,000. Luca recognized the name immediately. Corrupt. Greedy. The type of cop who sold information to the highest bidder. What did he sell? Vittorio's jaw tightened. Birth records. The room fell silent. Because everyone understood what that meant. The secret was gone. 22 years of protection. 22 years of lies. 22 years of sacrifice. Destroyed by a single envelope. Across the city, Marco DeLuca sat inside the penthouse office overlooking Manhattan. A cigar rested between his fingers. The city lights sparkled behind him. His smile was cold. Satisfied. Victorious. A large photograph sat on his desk. Sophia. He studied it carefully. The nursing student looked harmless. Ordinary. Completely unaware of her value. Marco laughed softly. Vittorio Romano had spent 2 decades hiding his daughter. Protecting her. Shielding her. And now? Now she belonged to the game. A knock interrupted his thoughts. Boss. Marco looked up. One of his lieutenants entered. You were right. Marco smiled. I usually am. The surveillance confirms it. The lieutenant placed additional photographs on the desk. Marco examined them. Sophia. Luca. Restaurants. Coffee shops. Walks through the city. The relationship was obvious. Interesting. Very interesting. Marco leaned back. Suddenly, a new opportunity appeared. Even better than kidnapping Sophia directly. Use Luca. Exploit the connection. Get close. Get access. Then strike. The plan practically wrote itself. How long? Marco asked. The lieutenant checked his notes. For days. Marco nodded slowly. Perfect. For days was all he needed. Back at the warehouse, Luca stood silently as the meeting continued. Military-style maps covered the tables. Surveillance reports arrived every few minutes. Security teams doubled. Safe houses were activated. Emergency protocols implemented. The entire Romano organization shifted into crisis mode. Because every person in that room understood one truth. If Marco captured Sophia, everything changed. Territories. Businesses. Political influence. Money. Power. Everything. Sophia wasn't just Vittorio's daughter. She was leverage. The most valuable leverage imaginable. Finally, Vittorio looked directly at Luca. When is the next time you'll see her? Luca hesitated. Friday. The room became quiet. Vittorio nodded. Then Friday is our deadline. Luca's stomach dropped. The words carried terrifying weight. Friday. Only 3 days away. 3 days before Marco moved. 3 days before Sophia's life changed forever. 3 days before the truth exploded. 3 days before the war began. Vittorio's voice hardened. After Friday, we may lose the ability to protect her. Nobody argued. Nobody questioned it. Because everyone knew he was right. The countdown had started. And somewhere across New York City, completely unaware of the storm approaching, Sophia Bennett sat at her kitchen table studying anatomy flashcards. Worrying about exams. Worrying about rent. Worrying about ordinary problems. Never realizing that some of the most dangerous men in America were now planning their next moves around her. And unless Luca found a way to stop what was coming, she had less than 72 hours before her entire world was shattered forever. Friday arrived with an unsettling sense of normalcy. The sky was clear. The city buzzed with its usual energy. People hurried to work. Tourists filled the sidewalks. Traffic clogged the avenues. New York looked exactly the same. But for Luca Romano, everything felt different. Every hour that passed tightened the knot in his chest. Every minute brought Sophia closer to danger. And he was running out of time. By noon, he had already checked his phone 27 times. By 3 o'clock, he'd changed their evening plans twice. By 5, he had stopped pretending everything was fine. Because it wasn't. Not even close. Sophia noticed immediately. "You've been acting weird all day." The observation came as they sat inside a small Italian restaurant in Midtown. Luca looked up from his untouched drink. "What makes you say that?" Sophia folded her arms. "You checked the door 4 times in the last minute." Luca forced a smile. "Maybe I like doors." She rolled her eyes. Terrible answer. Normally, her teasing would have made him laugh. Tonight it only made him feel worse. Because every second he delayed telling her the truth felt like betrayal. And yet, how was he supposed to explain any of this? "Hey." Sophia's voice softened. "You okay?" Luca looked at her. Really looked at her. The woman sitting across from him had no idea her life was hanging by a thread. No idea that powerful men were planning her abduction. No idea that her entire identity was built on secrets. No idea that the man she trusted most had been lying to her from the beginning. The guilt was becoming unbearable. Finally, he made a decision. Enough. No more waiting. No more protecting her through ignorance. Tonight she would learn everything. "Sophia." His voice was serious. Immediately, her expression changed. "What is it?" "We need to talk." A flicker of concern crossed her face. The words never got a chance to continue. Because at that exact moment, Luca's phone vibrated. One message. Only 3 words. "Move her now." Every ounce of color drained from his face. Sophia noticed immediately. "Luca?" His pulse exploded. Something had happened. Something bad. Very bad. Without another word, he stood. "We have to leave." "What? Now?" Confusion filled her eyes. "Luca, what's going on?" "We have to go." His voice carried an urgency she had never heard before. It terrified her. For the first time since meeting him, Sophia saw genuine fear in his eyes. And that frightened her more than anything. 10 minutes later, they entered an underground parking structure beneath a luxury office complex. The concrete levels stretched endlessly beneath the city. Rows of parked vehicles created long shadows beneath flickering fluorescent lights. Sophia struggled to keep up. Luca slowed down. He ignored her. Scanning. Watching. Listening. His instincts were screaming. Something was wrong. Dangerously wrong. The garage felt too quiet. Too empty. Too still. Then he saw it. A black SUV. Parked near the exit. Engine running. Windows tinted. His stomach dropped. Not Romano. Not security. Not friendly. Sophia noticed his expression. What is it? Luca grabbed her arm. Get behind me. What? Now. The command shocked her. Before she could respond, the first gunshot shattered the silence. Boom. The sound exploded through the garage. Concrete chipped from a nearby pillar. Sophia screamed. A second shot followed. Then a third. Then chaos. Everything happened at once. The SUV doors burst open. Four armed men emerged. Weapons raised. Moving fast. Professional. Deadly. Sophia froze. Her brain refused to process what she was seeing. This couldn't be real. People didn't just start shooting in parking garages. Not normal people. Not ordinary lives. Not hers. Luca shoved her behind a concrete support column. Stay down! Another barrage of gunfire erupted. Bullets slammed into vehicles. Car alarms exploded throughout the garage. Glass shattered. Metal screamed. Sophia dropped to the ground. Hand shaking. Heart pounding. Terror consuming every thought. Across the garage, another vehicle suddenly accelerated. A black Escalade. Its doors flew open. Men poured out. Armed. Fast. Disciplined. A second group. And suddenly the shooting intensified. The two teams opened fire on each other. The garage transformed into a battlefield. Sophia stared in horror. What is happening? Luca drew a handgun from beneath his jacket. The sight stunned her. A gun. Luca had a gun. And judging by the way he held it, this wasn't his first time. Not even close. Everything she thought she knew about him began collapsing. Luca? Not now. He fired twice. One attacker dropped. Sophia's entire world tilted sideways. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. Yet it was. Every terrifying second of it. The firefight lasted less than 3 minutes. But to Sophia, it felt like an eternity. Eventually sirens echoed somewhere above. The attackers retreated. Vehicles sped away. Silence slowly returned. Broken only by alarms and distant police sirens. Sophia sat trembling against the concrete pillar. Unable to move. Unable to think. Unable to understand. Luca approached carefully. Sophia. She looked up. And for the first time since meeting him, she saw a stranger. Not the man from the subway. Not the man from Central Park. Not the man she had fallen for. Someone else. Someone dangerous. Someone she didn't know. Her voice trembled. What are you? The question hit him like a knife. Because there was no avoiding the truth anymore. Not after tonight. Not after this. Luca slowly lowered his weapon. His expression filled with regret. Sophia! No. Tears filled her eyes. No more lies. He closed his eyes briefly. Then finally spoke the words he'd been dreading for weeks. Your father is alive. The world stopped. Sophia stared. Unable to breathe. Unable to blink. Unable to comprehend what she'd just heard. What? Your father is alive. No. Her voice cracked. No. He is. The tears began falling. My mother said. I know. No. Sophia backed away, shaking her head, refusing reality. But Luca continued. Because now everything had to come out. Your father is Vittorio Romano. The name meant nothing. At first. Then recognition appeared. News articles. Television reports. Rumors. Power. Fear. The realization hit like a freight train. No. Her voice became barely audible. Luca's eyes filled with pain. He's one of the most powerful crime bosses in America. The silence that followed felt endless. Then came the final blow. The worst one. The one she wasn't prepared for. You've been protected your entire life. Sophia stared. What? The men you've seen around you. Her heart stopped. The subway. The blood drained from her face. The coffee shops. Memories surfaced instantly. The hospital. The same faces. The same strangers. Always nearby. Always present. Always watching. No. Luca nodded. They've been protecting you for years. Sophia felt physically sick. Everything. Every single thing. Every belief. Every memory. Every certainty. Shattered. Then she looked directly into his eyes. One final question. One final truth. And you? The words barely escaped her lips. Luca's silence told her everything. You knew. Not a question. A realization. A betrayal. A wound. You knew all along. Luca swallowed hard. Yes. Sophia's heart broke. Because in that moment, the man she trusted most became the person who had lied to her the longest. And for the first time in 22 years, Sophia Bennett no longer knew who she was. But the worst truth was still waiting. Sophia's world had just been turned upside down. The truth about her father was finally uncovered. But the biggest betrayal was still waiting. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss part 2. Until next time. This is Boss Legacy Stories, where power is tested, secrets are revealed, and legacies are born.